Hello and welcome to the first MOSIP Forum. It's great to see a lot of our community members joining in. And I'd like to begin by thanking all of you for joining in. In some parts of the world, it's quite late. In some parts of the world, it's quite early. So thank you again for joining in. Before we begin today's specific discussions, let me quickly touch upon why we are building this space and how we intend to utilize this space as we go forward. So essentially, building community spaces has been a constant endeavor at MOSIP, whether it is the MOSIP website, the community website that we have, or the MOSIP journal, MOSIP 16.9, MOSIP Connect, or any such MOSIP marketplace. All these places, we want to bring all our stakeholders together to discuss ideas for cross-learning and other things. In the same kind of endeavor, we are also embarking on a new journey, which we are calling the MOSIP Forum. Essentially, MOSIP Forum will showcase webinars, workshops, training, and in future, we are also looking at podcasts. The idea is to take up one concept or one idea and dive deep into it. And we would like to bring experts, whether it is technology experts or country executives, policy experts, amongst others, to talk about these things specifically. So whether it is from MOSIP or whether it is our collaborating institutions, this forum will provide a way to bring these ideas to the larger community. So today's forum is being called Inclusion in Action. And specifically, we are focusing on gender inclusion and overall the larger inclusion efforts that MOSIP is making. So over the next 75 to 90 minutes, what we'll do is that we'll divide the entire webinar into 3 sections. The first one is where MOSIP will talk about the overall approach to inclusion that we have taken. The second and the third sections, we will invite our collaborating institutions, Oregon State University and Aapti Institute, to present their work and the research that they have done along with MOSIP. So just a couple of house rules. We will take all the questions as part of the Q&A box. You can put your questions and we'll try to answer them live. In case if there are any remaining questions or any questions at the end, we'll take a short Q&A session at the very end. Other than that, please, please type in your name and your organization affiliation to help us understand your questions and the context to give us better answers. Other than that, that's more or less the house rules, the webinar rules will apply. Just without taking much time, I will now invite Arun Gurumurthy, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of MOSIP, to talk about how MOSIP looks at inclusion and what is our overall approach to inclusive or inclusivity in our technology development. Over to you, Arun.
Thank you so much, Rohit. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. That gives me great pleasure to restart some of our webinar activities. We hit a pause. I'm sure you will have also gone through a period of exhaustion through the number of events. We are hoping all of this conversation is meaningful, and we're hoping that it adds to our understanding and provides a forum for us to share our knowledge to all of you. Next slide, Rohit. Yep. The potential of digital identity to enable access to rights and services cannot be overstated. Digital identity has the capability to leapfrog paper-based systems, has the capability to provide efficiencies of scale, of speed, of cost. At the same time, barriers to access can exclude significant number of people. This is also understood. Digital identity being foundational technology, any exclusion that creeps into the system at this level is only going to cascade further and is going to affect the entire delivery chain, right? Any digital identity system or any DPI must ensure no one is left behind. Otherwise, it ends up creating more problems than it solves. That's why we at MOSIP always keep some fundamental principles at the core while we design systems. Our vision is to build modular, secure, and open source technology, but we want these technologies to be human centric. We want these technologies to be inclusive, and we want these technology to almost enforce inclusion perspectives to rest of the chain of government to people interactions. Next slide, Rohit. How do we define inclusion? We define inclusion as inclusivity within MOSIP as enabling equal access through digital identity to people who might otherwise be excluded. We fundamentally take three different approaches to this. One is, of course, being a technology endeavor. We always aim to build technology which is inclusive. But we also embark on research and collaboration, which furthers our understanding on inclusion perspectives and contribute to the community as a whole, but primarily inform our own technology design and our own processes. Next slide, Rohit. Am I audible?
Sorry,
Yes, we can
network
hear
issue
you.
from.
Yeah. Sorry, there is some network issue. Just to illustrate some examples on what we mean when we say we aim to build inclusive technology, I want to take some examples, right? Uh, uh, an important point in an identity system where inclusion tends to creep in is the usurious requirement of documentation and documentary needs. A whole lot of communities who operate informally may not have the necessary documentation, right? While it is a policy question, the underlying technology should enable onboarding undocumented people. There are mechanisms built into MOSIP, like the concept of introducer, which takes a community approach to onboarding somebody within the system. The fundamental approach is to uh, even if the databases are slightly imperfect, endeavor to onboard everybody and then look at weeding out fraud rather than taking a perspective that you will avoid fraud at any cost. You should resort to the social capital, and the technology should enable governments to leverage such social capital to onboard people who may not have documentation, right? Language is an important aspect where exclusion can creep in. A system which is not intelligible to large masses of population may not be as effective. At MOSIP, we did initially imagine that uh, two language support would be sufficient. But then our experience with dealing with countries have shown that simultaneous two languages may not even be enough. So we went back to the drawing board to enable theoretical and language support as long as the UI supports such a design. But then we've seen requirements of three languages uh, being operated simultaneously in a digital identity system. Any system that uh, excludes based on language is fundamentally flawed. Biometrics are an important component in digital identity, right? In systems where there are trust issues or imperfect underlying databases, biometrics provide an invaluable tool to ensure uniqueness. At the same time, we do see that there are people with difficult to capture biometrics, and the system should not be uh, pigeonholed, or system should not be designed in a way that it does not provide for processing of anybody's digital identity without strong biometrics. In other words, it should provide for exception handling. You should be able to mark people with poor quality biometrics, or in some cases, no biometrics. Somebody with physical disabilities who cannot provide reliable biometrics should still operate and gain access to digital identity systems. We should account for geographical difficulties. We should account for cultural sensitivities, and therefore we should make any system, in this case, MOSIP system, should be capable of working offline, or should be mobile enough to reach people's home if people cannot reach registration centers. That we worked on offline capabilities and Android registration client, which can provide such mobility to any MOSIP-based digital identity system. For people to effectively utilize digital identity system even after they have received their digital identity, it is important to consider proliferating modes for authentication. A good system should provide for as many number of ways to verify yourself or authenticate yourself as it's possible. It could be OTP based, it could be biometric based, and with gains in smartphones and gains in internet connectivity, such an ID system should be able to bring verification capabilities to your phones and even to your homes. Most builds in these capabilities. We've embarked on creating products called Inji and eSignet, which essentially do this. While the world is moving towards smartphones, we have to factor in uh, 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 factor in usage of feature phones, which are still prevalent in much of Africa. And not leveraging this would mean uh, excluding people with feature phone capabilities from accessing services. MOSIP is engaging in research across with Alan Turing Institute, for example, to build resident services based on USSD. These are some inexhaustive examples of how we think of inclusion and how we iteratively consider new technologies, how we iteratively add features to make MOSIP more inclusive. Next slide, MOSIP. Rohit. Yep. We collaborate extensively. Some of the gains that we've made are not ours alone. We have partners which contribute to our mission, and we contribute to an ecosystem of stakeholders who are actively working on inclusion and inclusivity aspects. I briefly discussed Android registration client, which provides offline and mobility capabilities for MOSIP enrollments. It is a proud collaboration between Government of Ethiopia and MOSIP and other open source contributors. This software is now production ready, being deployed across multiple geographies. We are collaborating, for example, with Cambodia, which is working with us to design a unified login system based on a reliable database. In this case, it can be digital identity. This provides for a strong self-service based service delivery mechanisms. We have academic partnerships with multiple universities. Oregon State University is a proud partner. I'm looking forward to hearing from them through the rest of these sessions. We collaborate with Aapti Institute, and we've embarked on a project where we've attempted to investigate and understand obstacles to inclusion and access and how to mitigate. We collaborate with the UN system, the World Bank, for example, UN Refugee High Commission, International Organization on Migration, and World Food Program to inform us of inclusion perspectives. And we hope to continue our research, and we hope to continue our initiatives to further refine our work on this. And I call on the community to contribute to our understanding and, if possible, contribute to technology development as well. Without taking much more time, I want to hand over to Rohit because we will deep dive on two such initiatives that we've been able to make some progress on, and I'm looking forward to personally learning more. Over to you, Rohit. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you so much. Before I invite our next set of speakers, let me quickly tell the next two sessions essentially will look at gender inclusivity. One from the side of technology development and another from the side of technology deployment. So the team that I'm going to invite now, which is Professor Anita Sharma, Resham, and Pragya, will talk about gender inclusivity around technology development. Professor Sharma, along with an amazing team from the Oregon State University, have been working with us for about close to 3 years now. And we have done some good work that has gone into development. Our MOSIP team will also like to talk about how the research has been translated into the product development process and the software development life cycle that we have. Over to you, Professor Sharma.
Thank you very much, Rohit, and thank you, Arun, for setting the stage up. So let's go to the next slide, please. So one of the things we have been talking about is how tools can be exclusionary if language is not supported, if different device styles are not supported, like access to technology. So when we think about inclusion or inclusivity of technology, there are so many different dimensions that exist. One of the basic dimensions also is how we actually think. That is our cognitive diversity. Every individual is different in the way we think, we perceive, we process the information, and this actually impacts how we interact with the very UI there is. So tools can be exclusionary, even if language is supported, even if different access styles are supported, if the way the user interface or the UI is provided is contradictory or different than how an individual actually thinks. And you might be thinking, like, why is that a big deal? Like, you just look around, find the interface, figure it out. But it matters because if every software feature is slightly different, it's not how you usually work, it acts as a cognitive tax. It's an extra burden someone has to take to use the feature. And as these taxes, keep adding up, it becomes kind of a problem, and it might become a barrier that people might even stop using the tools and technology. So at Oregon State University, we were looking at, okay, how can software be made inclusive, right? There are these basic methods of accessibility for vision, language to be used, and all these other things we have talked about. But we wanted to see if there are some innate differences in how individuals are actually using the tool, which is causing barriers. And we also wanted to put the gender lens on it, which we will talk in a little bit. So let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. So what we have come over at Oregon State University is how can we help developers and practitioners find if there are problems in their user interface. So we have developed this method called GenderMag. It is Gender Inclusive Magnifier Lens, to actually find out if there are any kind of gender inclusivity bugs that are hiding in the very software features there are. Let us explore the different steps of the GenderMag framework so then you can get a better idea of what we actually do. Next slide, please. So GenderMag has this five main steps. And as we go through the slides, I'll be unpacking each of the steps and kind of talking more about it. Next slide. Let's take facets. So remember how I said that every individual thinks differently. There are these cognitive style differences, which we call facets. Through about 15 to 20 years of research in gender HCI, we have identified these 5 cognitive styles where individual differences are statistically clustering by gender. And each of these facets were supported by 5 separate empirical studies that showed the significant statistical differences. Let's unpack these facets further by going to the next slide. So we took these facets because they were in a spectrum, a range of values, right? So when we talk about attitude towards risk, it's like how risk averse is an individual in trying out a new feature. Okay, so I'm used to doing things a certain way on my computer. Now this digital ID system is on the mobile interface. Do I want to try the mobile interface and maybe something goes wrong, but I'm like really short on time. Let me try the more longer way that I'm aware of, I know how to work it, right? So there's this saying that I wish I had the time to take the shorter path, but I don't, right? Because anything that is new, and if you're time constrained, and especially if you're busy, you have 2 jobs, you are like very stressed out, trying out new features might be hard. So when we look at attitude towards risk, it's on a spectrum of those who are risk averse will not try out new features unless they're 100% sure, and those who are tolerant, they will try out new features. Next comes computer self-efficacy, right? How confident you are among your peer group in using a particular technology. And this matters because those who are having lower self-efficacy or self-confidence in technology, and things go wrong, they tend to blame themselves. And as more and more such failures occur, they might even quit the application. Whereas those who are higher confidence, higher self-efficacy are more resilient. And then why would someone use your technology, right? Some are task oriented. I'm very task oriented. We are hearing about AI everywhere. I only have started using ChatGPT when it was very clear of how it will help my particular task. I'm not a technophile. I'm not going jumping out the next model, the newest tool and trying it out. I'm just too old for trying those things out, right? And here's again a spectrum. Why would someone use the tool? And the next two part is about just learning and processing information. At one end of the spectrum is comprehensive information processors. They like to get all the information you need before starting a task. Whereas selective processors are those who take the first shortest piece of information, actionable piece of information, and start doing it. Then comes learning. Whether someone is tinkering, they can just poke, prod, figure things out by yourself, or someone who likes more scaffolding, a more process-oriented learners. Next slide, please. And one thing I want to mention here is that no one style is good or bad. It's just different, right? We just act differently. We just think differently. It's who we are. And every individual is messy, right? We are humans. We are messy. We have so many different experiences in life that we have faced that we're just different. So people are actually somewhere on the spectrum. I'm kind of all over the place, right? In some places, I'm more towards the left side, like task-oriented, risk-averse. But in some cases, like information processing and learning, I'm more on the right side. Now, why this matters is if only one side of the cognitive style spectrum are supported by tools, and we have seen more often than not, it's the right-hand side, and this means those who are on the left-hand side are kind of unsupported. And every time they have to use a new feature or a new tool, a new application, they have to pay this additional cognitive tax. And that's why tools can become exclusionary. And we want to stop that, right? We don't want to divide the population of, hey, you are the left-hand sided people, these are your styles, these are the right-hand side people, 2 separate products. What we want to do is debug your interface, debug your software so that it supports both end of the spectrum, and therefore it is inclusive of the different cognitive styles. Next slide. And now you might be thinking, okay, we have been talking about cognitive styles, but what does it matter for gender? Again, time and again, what we have seen and research, right? So we had looked at empirical research. These cognitive style clustering actually clusters by gender. More often than not, we have seen women skew to the left with their the cognitive styles, and whereas men tend to skew more towards the right-hand side. And it's not like all men are one way and all women are one way. It's just we are a mix. But the distribution of women tend to be on the left-hand side and the distribution of men on the right-hand side. And again, when tools only support the right-hand side of the cognitive styles, they become exclusionary of the left-hand side, which have higher distribution of women, and therefore this becomes a gender bias box. And next slide, please. So what can you do about that, right? And what we have done is we have taken the research on personas, which is you kind of create a archetypical user. And what we have done is we have said, let's take these 5 cognitive styles we have looked at and embed them into these personas. Next slide. And what we have done is towards the left-hand side, we have this persona called Abby, who kind of takes care or looks after all these left-hand side cognitive styles. And we have Tim on the other side, who's looking after the right-hand cognitive style people. And then we have this, remember my face was like in between. And we have the Pats, who are digital twins, who are just looking out for cognitive styles that are in the middle. So what we do is we take these 5 cognitive styles and we go to the next slide. And we embed them. It's up to you. You can change the figures, change the pictures that we have done. You can change what your persona does, what is their background and skills to match who your user is. But we keep fixed these 5 cognitive styles. And then what you have is the gender mag method. Let's go to the next slide. You take the persona, and remember, we are looking at those 5 cognitive styles that are embedded. You can do an evaluation. You can take either the Abby persona, the left-hand side person, or you can take the Tim persona, right-hand side. And then what you go through is a customized cognitive walkthrough, which is a human-computer interaction, HCI, inspection method, where you say, okay, what is the use case? You think as a designer on what is the ideal use case of your user going through the system, right? What is their overall goal? And then you break that into sub goals, because you decompose tasks. It's not just one big chunk. We break things down. And then for each sub goal, then you ask, would my persona, let's take Abby, be able to form this sub goal, right? If Abby is going to start this webinar and they have the sub goal that they need to switch off their video and audio and start screen share, would Abby have formed this sub goal of, okay, I need to switch off my mic so as to not disturb someone else, right? So that's the sub goal. And then you ask, would Abby have formed this sub goal? And when you answer the question, it could be yes, no, or maybe. Because what we do is Gender Mag works in a team. Usually the system designers get together. You have someone who drives the user interface, someone who facilitates the next steps, and together you kind of discuss whether it's possible or not. And this is inclusive. You don't have to all be a consensus of yes or no. You don't have to fight it out. Just collect all the information. And when you are thinking that, no, Abby would not have formed this sub goal, like a no or maybe, you not only think about what the user interface is, what it looks like, but you also think about these 5 cognitive styles that are embedded in the persona. Would motivation or risk averseness be somehow related to Abby not forming this sub goal, right? So maybe lower self-efficacy, and Abby has never done Zoom before, and she will not be sure what she has to do. And then what you take is like, okay, fine, let's push the sub goal in her head and move forward. And then there are 2 steps. You make Abby take the action. So like, click on the video, that camera link here. And then you again ask the question, would Abby know to take this step? And once the action is taken, you go to the next step. You say like, would Abby have known that she is making progress towards her goal? Right? So again, you will think about if Abby is not going to take the action, maybe that link is not clear. Maybe there are too many other icons that look similar. So Abby would be confused. She's highly risk averse. So she might not want to mess up the webinar here, and she would be not comfortable clicking on certain things. And then we take her hand and make her push the link. And then we say, okay, now that she's seeing that the video thing is switched off or canceled, she's on the right path. So we collect all these no maybes, which are usability bugs. But if a facet was involved, then these become gender inclusivity bugs. And at the end of this process, you go through multiple use cases, through multiple personas. You can use Abby, Pat, Tim. You can mix and match. These facets, as long as all the 5 facets at both end of the spectrum are taken care of. And then you kind of do a debrief and find out how many inclusivity bugs you found, and you go about trying to solve it. Next slide. So why does it matter, right? So what GenderMag helps you is find these bugs, like why, what facet was a problem, which style was a problem, where in the UI it was a problem, like that little camera button, it was not clear, it was very hard, and it was causing people risky because there was no information given. So you tie the inclusivity bug that you found to the particular fault or the where in the UI, and then you go about fixing it. And our research in multiple domains has shown that once you use GenderMag to fix this gender inclusivity bugs, it makes the tool better. So this is two results from two separate user studies where we had users come in, use the tool through certain tasks before GenderMag evaluation was done. Orange here represents women, blue men. And you can see in the original version, women were failing at the task, having problems, verbalizing, I don't know what to do, where to go forward, at least 3 times more than men. And in the post-fix version, you can see the gap, 36 to 4, it is drastically reduced. So it is better tool. You can also see the equity gap, like between 36 and 10 and 4 and 1 has been also reduced. And what it also can see is not only the oranges did less problem, had problem less, faced fewer bugs, but also the blues. This is what is the idea of curve cuts, right? So when you fix a tool or you help one underserved population, it actually makes the tool or the interface better for rest of the population. So in the second graph that you can see over here, we also see that women in the earlier version failed at twice the rate, but on the post-fix version, they did better and the gender gap kind of disappeared, right? So that's why we have shown that these inclusivity bugs that are arising from just how different people think and feel or perceive can actually make a significant difference in how much barriers and problems they're facing with the technology itself. And again, it is helping also the men and the blue because, again, remember, every human is on a spectrum. Nobody's a pure Abby or a pure Tim. They're in between. So you're helping them all. Next slide. So we have been doing GenderMag for at least 15 years now. We have seen inclusivity issues, bugs coming out in open source project, programming environments, a whole slew of other domains. Every time someone downloads a GenderMag kit and they tell us about, they used it, we kind of color the state in the US or the country. And as you can see, it has been widespread use. And we are very happy that a lot of people are using GenderMag in the research community as well as in the professional community. Next slide. So what about our journey with MOSIP? So as I think Rohit mentioned that it has been 3 years, right? So this journey started when Professor Rajgopalan reached out to us because they were looking at how gender inclusivity can occur at the technology design level. And we started this collaboration. And as researchers, right, we wanted to work it through an action research, more rigorous method. And action research method is a HCI research method where subject matter experts or researchers work with practitioners to kind of bring the idea of a new method, say here GenderMag method, in the unfreeze stage, kind of figuring out how this method could be incorporated, getting buy-in from top down here, Professor Rajgopalan, Arun, as well as getting buy-in from bottom up, the developers themselves. And then we move on to this middle thing, the red thing called the changing stage, where we're trying to see how this method can be adopted or adapted to the particular process. Because again, industry is different. Each industry's context is different. You can't just take something and plop it in, right? Things have to mix and match. And that's the beauty of action research is practitioners learn and researchers learn about how this method would actually work within the context of the team. And then it goes on to the refreeze stage where basically this method and this idea kind of gets inculcated into the process and becomes part of the process. So that's kind of the 3-level stage of action research that we had used. And going to the next step. Next slide, please. So you can see what that means, right? So in the changing stage, the teams at MOSIP, first with our help, then kind of by themselves, started conducting these GenderMag evaluations. And you can see from the bar graphs, the dark blue is the number of gender inclusivity bugs they found. And on the bottom, you can see which persona they had used, right? And you can see they were starting pretty high, like 75, 84% of the features they were looking at had some gender inclusivity bugs. I was like, all right, like it's not that great. But what you can see is this drop, right? And it's not that we were evaluating or re-evaluating the fixed versions. We were just, these are the first time evaluations of particular features or different applications. But what was happening was, as people were doing these gender mag evaluations, they were talking about it. And there was a shift in inclusivity thinking. There was a shift in the design thinking, right? And people started talking more and thinking about Abby and her cognitive styles, not only in the tools, but also in their everyday life, right? And this led to a reduction in inclusivity bugs forming even at the earlier stage, even at the design stage. So what it means, like gender MAC evaluations, we started at the post-design phase. After things have been designed, you're evaluating, to actually inclusivity being part of the design process earlier in the system. And this led to much fewer inclusivity bugs later when we're evaluating it. So I'm super happy because this meant that gender mag, the concept, thinking about Abby, thinking about cognitive styles, was part of the design thinking. And I will now hand it over to Resham or Pragya to kind of talk about what really happened behind the scenes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sharma, for very clearly setting the context and explaining the gender mag method and its relevance. So as Professor was mentioning, one of the most tangible outcomes for us here at MOSIP using the gender mag method has been the significant reduction in the inclusivity bugs, right? Uh, of course, these are not bugs just related to inclusivity, but also to usability as well to an extent. Um, so what did we do at MOSIP? We picked up 3 applications, INGI, Resident Portal, and eSignet. INGI, very specifically, we picked up the mobile wallet for evaluation. Resident Portal, which had features for managing the ID once it is issued, and eSignet, of course, for which is the authentication layer, which allows you to authenticate using different modes of verification. Um, the difference being, I'll actually take you through the journey of what we did, what we learned from Oregon State University under the guidance of Professor Sharma and her team, and then how did we actually customize and internalize the process to suit our needs. So when we started off with the INGI application, and this was mostly done on the released version of the wallet, of the mobile wallet. What we did was we carried out 13 structured sessions. So if you see the numbers here, we'll just take an example of INGI, where 13 structured sessions were carried out, and we evaluated about 5 use cases. We identified about 56 issues, and then we fixed and released about 20 of them. uh, if you see the statistics for resident portal, it's almost half of them. So the identified issues were about 47, where more than half, about 31, were related to inclusivity. So of course that moved into the design phase, and then for eSignet we released about 5 of them and we fixed it. You might be wondering what happens to the issues that are not fixed, right? What we do, the approach that we follow here is that we prioritize the issues which have a higher impact, those issues which have a stronger ROI, or in terms of the user needs, if it has higher user experience needs, then we pick up those issues first. And the remaining issues are, however, moved to the backlog. We prioritize them along with the existing product development, just to ensure we pick them up iteratively across our sprints. And this approach helps us in inculcating continuous improvement in the process without actually slowing down our product development as well. So this worked as a more sustainable approach for us, helping inclusivity in the longer run. So uh, maybe we can move on to the next slide. This was more on the statistics on the downward trend of the inclusivity bugs. So what you see here is more of a visual representation of the improvements from the gender mag evaluation. What you see on the left is a before slide of the application of resident portal, and on the right we have the after snapshot. Um, so the changes that you see are not just purely cosmetic, but they actually helped us address uh, gaps in terms of usability, especially those that excluded users with different cognitive styles or people who are not very familiar with technology. Like Professor Sharma was mentioning, we have users with different cognitive styles, people or users who would take a risk and just click on a button to explore a feature, versus users like maybe senior citizens who are not very familiar with technology and would be risk averse and would not click on that button and would actually make a phone call to their daughter or to a known acquaintance to find out what do I do and how do I proceed, right? So this, what you see, is a before and after snapshot. This is just one example of what kind of changes we brought in our design. These sessions also led to deriving design guidelines, which then made its way to our design toolkit, which we'll be talking about shortly in the session. Guidelines like provide detailed task information upfront, right? So, like if you look at the snapshot on the left, it's very blank. It doesn't even have a heading. It doesn't even talk about what is the process. Whereas if you look at the screenshot on the right, it gives you information about the task that the user is about to attempt. Well, at the same time, it also ensures that you avoid cluttering and providing unnecessary information, right? So you provide just the necessary information which is required. You provide adequate cues as well, so that the user progresses in exploring the feature. And things like maintaining consistency. So if I have 10 features on a portal, I should have the action button placed in a certain place and keep it consistent, or keep it in a certain color, so that the user knows that this is a positive action and this is a negative action, right? And also to clearly indicate multiple ways of doing things. Maybe that's an example that I can show you on the next slide. Rohit, maybe we can move to the next slide. Yeah. So here, this is a sample screenshot from the Inji mobile wallet. What you see on top is a before, what you see at the bottom is the after. On top, uh, if you just see the left part which says Robert Becker, it's basically a verifiable credential or a card which is showcased on the wallet. And for a person who's not very tech savvy, who's very risk averse to even click on something, is not going to understand that there's a hidden gesture, there's a feature here that if you swipe, you will actually receive these, you can actually access these features which are on the right side, right? So these features are called hidden gestures. But if you go to the bottom and if you see the after, you have the three dots, which is the ellipsis. So that indicates that there is a feature there, and as a user I know that there is something there which I can click, and then it gives me various options, right? So these are the kind of things that we started to experience, we started to improvise on in terms of the design. So these are results of structured process, starting with the evaluation sessions, which were conducted by our trained evaluators, followed by a thorough review of the design with the team to identify the fixes for these issues. And then they were taken to development, testing, and then they were released. So it was a long drawn process, of course, a very well structured, long drawn process. But how did we at MOSIP go through this journey? What did we do to make it work for us? Because we cannot have a very long drawn process for every application. So, how did we customize and internalize the process so that it worked for us? Rohit, next slide, please. Right. So our journey with Gender Mag started off with learning the process and getting certified. So we started by observing how the Gender Mag sessions were run, by attending the ones that were led by the OSU team, by the Oregon State University team, and gradually learning how to apply the method ourselves. So what we did was, first we of course attended the sessions, and these were evaluations on the Inji application. Next, our trainers got formally trained, and they stepped into lead sessions all under OSU's guidance. And they eventually became certified gender mag advocates. But what really transformed us was the shift in mindset. It made us, and it made me personally, ask questions which we never used to ask before. Would this actually, would this feature be easy to access for someone who's non-tech savvy? Would my parent or would my grandparent actually know where to click and go ahead with a feature? Or can someone who is not very digitally native still complete this process with utmost confidence that I'm not clicking the wrong button? Right. So these are the kind of questions we started asking ourselves when we started even designing a feature which had a front end. Uh, so these sessions actually changed the way we thought about users. It did not, it was not just a checklist for us, it sort of became a way of thinking in the team throughout. And this was not just with the trainers, but also with the evaluators who attended the session, who started thinking on those terms. And eventually, it also cascaded down into our product team as well. Today, what have we done to internalize and customize this process? Um, what we did was, we, instead of, like I mentioned earlier, we started off evaluating NG, eSignet, and Resident Portal on the developed applications. But today, what we do is we start analyzing these as soon as the designs are being made. So as soon as we have, let's say, a portal which is being designed and a feature that needs to be curated, we do not wait for it to be released and then evaluate. Rather, at the design phase itself, we bring in these designs into our product discussions. It helps us in early reviews, and it helps us with greater turnaround and making faster inclusive decisions. And all of this, of course, is done with the certified trainers. What has this actually done for us? uh, these sessions have basically changed the way we think about the users. Today, it's not just about achieving that technical accuracy in a feature, but it's more about inclusion, of course, but it's about empathy. It is also about clarity in the feature, right? It is also about ensuring accessibility, basically building a feature which is accessible to all kinds of users and not just the ones. Because I think we are automatically biased because we come from the technology world, where we do not tend to think from the end user's perspective. But this actually changed the way we thought. And this wasn't just a process that we applied, but it started becoming just a way of thinking eventually. So, yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, here what you see is a snapshot of our MOSIP members who are now certified Gender Mag trainers. And having in-house certified advocates actually helps us sustain this practice in the longer term, right? Because we have multiple applications to be evaluated, and having in-house certified trainers helps us through a sustained process. And what they do is, they don't just evaluate, they embed inclusive thinking right from the very start, from the first design conversation itself. So yeah, we can move on. So, what were the key outcomes for us? This customized approach has actually led to a real impact for us. It has helped us get accelerated feedback cycles, bringing in faster feedback from the team. Uh, we have inclusion, which is brought into the technology right from the beginning, basically reducing the risk of exclusion and reaching out, building features which uh, reaches out to all kinds of users, obviously, which then has a greater usability and impact. So, however, for us, I think it is not just a one time approach. It has to be, and it is, like I said, it's a mindset, it's an ongoing journey for us. Uh, and as part of this journey, I think it's not just about improving our own products and applications, but it is also about giving back also sharing our learnings and what we've learned, what we've built, and what we've adopted with the broader ecosystem through the various initiatives that have actually emerged out of this entire process. So, with that, I would actually like to call upon Pragya, who is also our certified gender MAC trainer, who will take you through the various initiatives, the tools that we intend to build at MOSIP and contribute back to the broader community for consumption. So, Pragya, over to you. Thanks, everyone.
Well, hello everybody. I hope I am loud and clear. Thank you so much, Resham. Thank you for summarizing MOSIP's journey, our journey so far with GenderMag. Like Resham was mentioning earlier in the deck today, inclusivity for us isn't just internal. In fact, we always had two agenda items in our vision. One that revolves around giving back to the community, and the other one revolves around automating the whole process of finding gender inclusivity bugs. Now, in the light of the first agenda item, we at MOSIP, in collaboration with OSU, have worked on a document. It's called the Design Guideline Document. Can we go to the next slide, Rohit? Yeah, so this is how the first page of the design document looks like, right? And this design document is actually an outcome of all the gender mag evaluations that we did for various modules, like Resident Portal, ING, and eSignet. Now, what can you expect from this design guideline document? Or rather, what is the content of this design document? I would just summarize it into 4 parts. The first one is that it gives you a list of 11 best practices that one must follow to make sure that the UI is gender inclusive. The second one is that it gives you the rationale behind each design document pointer that we have put, as in why do we implement this? The second one is, the third one is the fact that it gives you the gist of the impact of the design document. As in, if there's a pointer number 4, it also tells you what is the impact of this design guideline if you incorporate this. And the fourth one is a visual representation of the do's and don'ts. In the sense, you will find like 2 images next to each other. One will show you what you should do, and one will show you what you should not do, right? The PDF version of this design document is available on our official MOSIP website. It is there for consumption and for contribution. Now, having said that, as and when we evaluate various other modules, like I said, right, we have for now evaluated Resident Portal, ING, and eSignet. But as and when we evaluate other modules, I'm pretty sure that we'll have a bigger number of guidelines that we will have in this particular document. Basically, we'll keep expanding the horizon of this document. Right now, like I was saying, 2 agenda items, right? First one was, of course, how to give back to the community. Second one is that, how do we hop onto the AI wagon? Now, I would just take an intentional pause here because I just said AI wagon, right? I just want you to imagine the kind of impact that we can make in the UI UX world if we sort of bring gender mag, we bring AI, and we sort of marry each other. We just make them marry each other, and the kind of impact that can bring, I think it will be unimaginable. Right. So we were just trying to explore how can we leverage AI to identify and rectify the gender inclusivity bugs. AI, quite evidently, is the talk of the town for all the right reasons. The things that AI can do are unimaginable, like I said, and we do not want to miss out on the amazing possibilities that AI can bring to the table. Hence, we also decided that, we have to come up with something called GenderMag AI tool that helps us identify any gender inclusivity bugs in a jiffy. Right? Now, how do we make that happen? Rohit, can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So we can make this happen using our own GenderMag AI tool, right? So this is the first time we are ever mentioning about this particular tool to the outside world. Since the past few months, we have just been working internally on this. But what exactly is this tool about? This tool is about whatever we have done so far, right? We spoke about performing gender mag on various modules. So as an outcome of that, what we have done is, I also spoke about design guidelines, right? So basis that, we have also come up with something called decision rules. Now, there's a lot that goes into that, and I think we will talk about it in some other session. But today, I just want to take you through the UI of it. How do we at MOSIP envision the whole UI to be, right? Since it is not really developed as of yet, I might not be able to show you. It's just a prototype, basically. right? So if you can just see this, on the left side, we have just said that, this is what our AI tool will do. It's just like a normal definition of it. But on the right side, if you see, we have just mentioned 5 steps, right? Now, these 5 steps are the only steps you will ever need to actually evaluate your own screen. So now what will this AI tool do? Let's say you have built your own AI, maybe any particular UI, could be login screen as well, right? So when you do that, and you want to sort of know that, is your UI gender inclusive? In that case, what you'll do is you'll just use this tool, and at the end, you'll get sort of a report that will tell you, yes, it is gender inclusive, or maybe, you're violating a particular rule. That's the gist of it, right? Now, 5 steps, I will just take you through all of these 5 steps real quick. Step 1 is to upload the screenshot of the screen that you would want to evaluate, right? Simple, upload it. Second would be to choose the relevant persona. Now, when I say relevant persona, today we have, like we were talking about other personas, we have Abby, we have Pat, and we have Tim. But in the future, we will have more personas. So you can essentially choose the relevant persona. Step 3 would be simple, just to click on start analysis. Step 4 would be to wait for the AI tool to sort of analyze your screen and identify the violations, and hence prepare a report. And step 5 would be to just get the detailed report. Right now, if you can just go to the next screen, Rohit, we'll be actually able to see the tool itself. Yeah. So here, if you see on the left side, like I said, step 1. Step 1 is to choose to upload your screenshot. Let's say you want to evaluate login screen. So you take a screenshot of that and you upload it here. So on the right side, you see image preview. This is what it'll look like. You'll have the preview of the screenshot that you have actually uploaded. Now click on the next button. So that will take you to the next screen. Rohit, can you go to the next screen? Yeah. Step 2 was, if you remember, was to choose the relevant persona. So here you can see Abby, Tim, Emma, blah, 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 right? So here we have tried to sort of incorporate as diverse set of persona as possible. We have taken care of gender, we have taken care of various age group, we have taken care of physical ability, disability, and also we have taken care of geographical diversity, right? So next thing that you can, let's say, you just go through the screen and then you don't exactly know what are the traits of Abby. So what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna have to click on Abby. Rohit, can we go to the next screen? Yeah. So when you click on any of those personas for that matter, you'll be able to see this detailed description of that particular persona. So here, if you see, it says Abby. Just a second. Yeah, it says Abby. It gives her age. It gives, the background and skills that she has, and a bit of bio. And you can actually select Abby from here itself. If you can see the selected button here. And then you simply click on start analysis. Rohit, can we go to the next screen? So once you click on start analysis, it will do its magic at the background. And once it's done, it will barely take like, a few seconds. And once it's done, you'll be able to see this screen. This is the actual report screen. This is the screen that we are working forward to. This is the screen that you would want to see at the end. Now here you see the report. On the left side, you have the screenshot that you uploaded. We are also sort of telling you that this is the area where the violation exists. And on the right side, we have given the description. There are 3 parameters that you will see here. First one is the rules violated. So like I was saying, the design guideline documents has the 11 design guidelines. Basis that, we have actually mapped those into decision rules. So you can imagine sort of an Excel sheet, where we have listed everything, and then corresponding to each design document guideline, we have decision rules, right? So if your UI is violating any of those decision rules, we will just notify you here. The first parameter that you see, rules violated. The next thing is issue. It will sort of define the issue also, that this is the problem that Abby or the persona is facing. And the last thing, which I think is a bit ambitious, but hey, how else you get things done? So the last thing is the recommendation, where the AI will also tell us that if you do this, your UI will be inclusive. I mean, gender inclusivity will be taken care of, right? So this is what we are working on currently. Yeah, so based on the report that you see here, you can tweak your actual UI accordingly, and hence make the UI gender inclusive. With this UI design toolkit, and with this AI powered tool, we are helping others design inclusive systems as well. And I think that's about it about the AI tool. Yeah. We at MOSIP believe that, inclusivity is an ongoing journey and not a destination. And in this journey, we would like to hear from you as well. So I would request you to sort of write to us at at community.mosip.io and share with us how we can improve or reach out on how you could collaborate with us further on the above initiatives. Your inputs will help us build better. I think that's about it. I will now like to hand over to Rohit.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pragya. Quite an interesting research going on there. So we know we are running a little short of time, so I'll quickly jump into the next session. The next session is led by our collaborators, the Aapti Institute. I would like to call upon Kunal and Moshmi to talk about the multi-country research work that the Aapti team has taken up and the findings of that research. So over to you, Kunal.
Thank you, Rohit. And thank you everyone for joining in. Like I think Arun said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to have everyone here. And a little bit about us. We are Aapti Institute, a research organization based out of Bangalore in India. And we have been working now with MOSIP for a little over 2 years, where we have tried to look at a lot of the components that intersect with technology and society. So we framed it as human technology interface. And I think for us, it's been a very interesting journey to be able to explore a lot of the gender-specific pitfalls and challenges, especially when digital identity systems are built out and deployed. And that's where our research over the last 2 years has been anchored on. We have looked at the system holistically, and we have tried to understand the various ways in which various barriers emerge for women specifically, and what are the different ways in which ID developers, community-based entities, and users themselves can over time play a more active role in strengthening the design and deployment of that system. I'll just share my screen and we can get started on the presentation. I hope my screen is visible to all. So over the last 2 years, we've been doing this ethnographic multi-country study, as Rohit suggested, and we have been able to come across not an analysis of digital ID systems in specific countries, but rather a more comprehensive understanding of how, when women interact specifically with digital identity systems within their countries, what are the different interaction points? What are the different ways in which ID systems might not necessarily be conducive for the experience? And what are the ways in which we can start addressing these challenges? And I think, like Pragya mentioned, there isn't necessarily an end that we can sort of say that, this is fixed, but what we're hoping is that over time, the ways in which addressal happens takes into consideration the various lived experiences and interactions that take place sort of in real time. We'll go over 3 sections today, just in terms of how we have structured our research. We'll share some insights and learnings from the sort of 2-year multi-country ethnographic study that we've conducted. This will be led by Moshmi, who will share with us how we structured the research, what kind of findings we got, what are the recommendations that we have suggested, and what are the different approaches that we're hoping can be taken up by different stakeholders within the ecosystem to be able to start addressing questions around gender exclusivity. So moving on to, I think, the need, right? And I think this is something that comes up either quite a lot or is assumed, is that exclusion typically occurs across a variety of different parameters or the different sort of ways. And what we started to kind of conceptualize prior to our engagement was that it has to be a much more intentional approach to incorporate gender inclusivity. And the ways in which we wanted to do this aligned, I think, similarly with what MOSIP was trying to do to build out a much more inclusive system holistically. So it was a lovely sort of union of the research that we do and the work that MOSIP is trying to do in the space as well. And I think essentially what we started to realize was that the inclusivity part, it starts sort of addressing a lot of different vulnerable groups. When systems are built more holistically, they tend to kind of unlock opportunities, improve participation, not just sort of from the access to digital IDs, but in the usage of them as well. And it starts addressing a lot of societal exclusive structures or historic sort of marginalization that takes place. It starts addressing some of those problem areas as well. And I think ultimately what we have seen in a lot of different ways is that this sort of addressal starts kind of thinking or working towards positively impacting a country's growth. And this was kind of the problem statement that we had started off with, is how do we now think about strengthening gender inclusivity within digital ID systems, which is a very fundamental, I think, cornerstone or building block for a country. So how do we think about it? How do we create sort of pathways and avenues to address areas? Actually, first of all, just identify where these areas exist. And I think there's a question earlier about what are the different types of barriers that even exist. So what our report has been able to do, what our research has been able to do, is identify a variety of different exclusion barriers and the ways in which countries have innovatively tried to address them. We've also tried to kind of incorporate that within the report too. So I'll hand it over to Moshimi to walk us through a little bit of the methodology, a little bit of what we were able to uncover, and we will shortly sort of go through sections 2 and sections 3, which is around the toolkit and the community of practice that we built, and we'll get into that shortly. But Moshimi, over to you.
Right. Thanks, Kunal. Thank you so much for setting the context. I will be speaking more about the research framework, what our methodologies was, what were some of the findings, and what are some of the recommendations that we have made as part of our research in the report. So first of all, as Kunal has already told about what are some of the benefits and goals of looking at an inclusive digital ID system, because we are trying to solve for the problem of exclusion. There are a lot of harms that are caused to the vulnerable group, and exclusion is caused to the marginalized group when they are not thought about while building the digital ID system and as well as during the deployment. And also, as more and more services are getting digitized and there is a link between the digital IDs and access to services, there are chances that there is denial of, and there are actually cases where the denial of access to these services to the marginalized group, including women, which affects the access to service delivery and their access to welfare. And therefore, it is important to understand how are the public funds and how is the public money being actually used to think and build about system which is inclusive. So some of the principles that we have kept in mind while we were doing the research and which are kind of key when we think about inclusion or gender inclusion in the digital ID system are the principles around privacy, security, collaboration, co-creation, transparency, and accountability. I wouldn't want to go into much detail into each of the principles as some of them have already been discussed by the MOSIP team. Now, what has come out of the research are a couple of knowledge assets that we have built. So, one is our research framework, which we call as the ATO framework, awareness, access, and usage. It has been kind of the key skeleton and backbone for our research and help us unpack the challenges as well as the enablers in our report, and also help us come up with the key recommendation. Second is the toolkit, which Kunal will be talking more about and kind of demo it towards the end of my presentation, which is built towards the ID developers and deployers, and how could we think about incorporating some of the practices, what could some best practices look like, what could be the implications of not thinking about some of those practices. And another knowledge assets that we were able to kind of build as part of this research was a community of practice. So these were individuals and organizations based out of Philippines, India, Ethiopia, where these actors they have already been on the ground and have been working around gender and access. So understanding from them what is access and the link between the digital ID and the access, or even ID, because there were many such organizations and individuals where these conversations are very nascent. So they were able to kind of share their insights during this community of practice. And the last is our inclusion website, which is kind of the hub of our work that we have partnered with MOSIP, which kind of highlights our work around the community of practice and also around the research that we have done, and also resources that we have been able to gather during the course of our research. Next slide, please. So some of you use like a variety of methodologies, various set of methodologies to come up with a research framework. We use primary research, secondary research, ecosystem engagement, and the community of the practice. So as part of the primary research, as Kunal already mentioned, we conducted ethnographic research. These were around the lived experience of women. How do they actually get to know about ID? How do they access ID? What does their usage look like? So questions around their awareness, access, and usage. There were also visits to the registration centers and also semi-structured interview with some of the key actors in the ecosystem, including ID authorities, to understand what does actually happens on ground and what does the awareness, access, and usage looks like. Then secondly, we look at the DEX test research, where we looked at the existing research in the area, and we were also able to identify some of the gaps. And then we were also able to take some of our learnings from the primary and secondary research to the ecosystem engagement, where Kunal and I, we have been able to present both this framework and some of our learnings, and able to kind of test run some of our learnings and be able to like shape and strengthen our framework. Then lastly, in the community of practice, we have been able to continuously engage with them and try to understand what awareness, access, and usage looks like in their country. What are some of the nuances? Because all of these things, even though very universal, also have particular nuance based on the journey, the digital ID journey, or the digital system journey of that particular country. And tying it all together, it gave us the framework for our research, which is awareness, access, and usage. Next slide, please. So when we talk about awareness, access, and usage, we realize that this is almost like a cyclic journey. So it does not mean that you stop at awareness or you stop at access or usage. This is almost like a cyclic loop for a movement. So when we talk about awareness, we are talking about factors. For example, are women aware about digital ID, that digital ID system exists in their country? Are they aware what are these systems meant to be? What are these systems meant to facilitate? Are they aware like what could they actually get from access from getting one? What could the benefits look like in their life? And even when they have awareness, let's say about the digital ID, what does access look like for them? Even if they are aware that okay, this is the registration center, how they are actually able to access the registration center? What are some of the constraints involved? Are there any logistical constraints? Are there any legal constraint or social constraint? What are some of these barriers look like? And even when they have to access the center, what are some of the mechanisms in place or not in place to support those access? And then when it comes to usage, even when they have been able to get an ID, it's very important to understand how a woman actually using their ID. Do they actually have the agency to kind of confidently and engage with the digital ID system? As women in the digital ecosystem tends to be even more vulnerable and suffer from various kind of harms. So are the system being built which are trustworthy enough for them to be able to keep on engaging? Are there any experiences which have kind of left them thinking about or maybe not trusting the system, or maybe any kind of bad usage experiences, or even some kind of experiences that have been able to for them be able to like access some kind of welfare and kind of instill that confidence in them to access these services again? So this is what the overall framework for awareness, access, and usage looks like. There are some of the key categories under each of this framework. For example, information challenges, unfavorable social norm, lack of agency. So these are some of the key categories which are under each of these buckets. Now these are mentioned in great detail in our report. And what we have also done is we have also kind of mapped each of the challenges and enablers to this framework. Next slide, Kunal. Right. So as I already mentioned, within the awareness, access, and usage, these are some of the challenges which are present. But what we notice that even across these three buckets, there are certain challenges which are very much persistent, and these are main or key challenges that we have kind of seen, which kind of repeats themselves across the user journey. For example, the informational challenges, so which means that it's not about understanding that okay, where can I get the ID, but also understanding how can I use the ID for, what can I use the ID for, what are some of the services that are available, and how do I actually go and use those services. When it comes to the resource constraint, even a lot of the time, even when they want to obtain the ID, a lot of the time they have the time constraint or even the money constraint, because a lot of the women that we spoke to, they have to shell out some or other money to kind of access the service, whether it's getting the ID or maybe like using their ID to avail any kind of services. So things like time and money, these are actual real resource constraint for women on the ground that needs to be kept in mind, and a big challenge when we are thinking about an inclusive digital ID system. Then normative challenges, there are also socio-normative challenges that we observe on the ground. So a lot of the times, even when women have ID, a lot of them are seen as a collective kind of documents. So for them to have the agency to actually take a decision and kind of go on their own and to be able to access the services, a lot of the times they have to kind of be dependent on their male family member or a head of the family to get go on availing certain kind of services. So these are some of the normative challenges. Then the lack of intermediaries and maybe the grievance redressal system. A lot of the times when we observe that there are various kind of intermediaries present, both formal and informal. So the informal intermediaries, such as they could be community champions, they could be people maybe within their family or their network. They also help to kind of facilitate their awareness and access around the digital ID system. But a lot of the times when these challenges are missing, it creates kind of a barrier and silos for the women to be able to access their point of information. And for example, let's say if tomorrow they have to change their ID credential, they have to change their surname post marriage, or they have to change, like, let's say maybe their address. So a lot of the times when they face the issue, they do not know who to go to. Maybe they not have supportive actors near them to be able to kind of access the support of such intermediary, or maybe they are not aware of what is the proper channel to kind of take my grievance to. So these are some of the intermediary and grievance related challenges that we have seen. Now, when it comes to the biases and the roadblocks, a lot of the times, as Professor Sharma has already mentioned about some of the cognitive biases which are already there in the technology. So even when we are talking about the UI, UX, or how the technology is built and how women actually access the technology, it's very different from maybe the other populations. So when technology is built in keeping in mind for the larger mass and not keeping in mind for the vulnerable population, there are a lot of barriers that they also face. So these are some of the main categories and some of the challenges that we have seen across the digital ID journey for the women. Next slide, please. Now, what these leads us to is that I would just want to take maybe like some time to kind of take you through some of the key nuances or key like insight that we observed even across these three pillars. For example, when it comes to the awareness, a lot of the times, even when women are aware that there is a ID center or there is a registration center or a service center, a lot of the times they take decision on the basis of the like how far the ID center is, how much time is going to take for them to kind of travel to the place. Are there any informal networks who support that they can like take to kind of go there and who can provide them more information? A lot of the time there is even lack of information. For example, what are the documents that they might need. So even awareness of the level, like if they need to change any credentials of their document, what are some of the supporting documents that might be needed, and if there is lack of those supporting documents, how can they actually go and get them made. So these are some of the awareness level insights that we saw. Now, when it comes to access, even when it's about like accessing information, a lot of the time, especially what we have observed in rural part of the country, is that even when there is awareness about the registration center, a lot of the women they preferred going together, having the support of the other women or maybe the community actors to like support a registration, to go and like access a registration center or any kind of service, because they kind of relied on the community actor for them to facilitate that access, because there is that network of trust, there is network of because the person being from that community, and they can probably go back to the same person in case there is some issue with their ID. But what we also observe that there is also like a lot of information asymmetry in terms of how these ID centers are designed, how these service centers are basically distributed across the geographical system. So a lot of the rural areas, the registration centers, or maybe all of the ID centers or the service centers, they might be very far away from the places. And while in the urban population, you have variety of private intermediaries, for example, CSC centers and the digital centers, which are there to facilitate that access. So there is a lot of like information asymmetry or asymmetry in the terms of like support that they can expect when it's about accessing. Now, when it comes to usage, a lot of the times what has happened is that digital literacy about using any kind of services. So now whenever you're using a digital ID to basically get it authenticated, putting in the credentials, so it does require some basic amount of digital literacy in terms of how to actually input the details. Maybe an OTP comes that you put in the device and kind of authenticates your ID, and then you move forward. So even when you're using an ID, it requires access to some kind of devices. It requires some kind of digital literacy for the woman to be able to kind of use any kind of services. So that kind of hampers their usage. Other than that, there also has been negative experiences where they have not been able to kind of avail any services, and it kind of shapes their perception about whether they should be going ahead in updating their ID or maybe applying for any service again or not. So when they have a successful experience with accessing any kind of welfare, it kind of boosts their confidence. Now, lastly, what we have also seen that a lot of the times now ID system, they are not only positioned as an individual ID, but they are also like used, for example, to facilitate maternity benefits or maybe family level welfare plans or any kind of service delivery. So let's say if there is any kind of issue in the credentials of the mother's name on the digital ID, a lot of the time it also leads to barrier for family level welfare. So for example, if she wants to like maybe get any maternity benefits, they need to ensure that the credentials on her ID as well on the ID of the other family members and maybe probably the children, they also match. So these are some of the nuances in terms of the insights that we have seen, the challenges across awareness, access, and usage that plays out on ground. Next slide, please. Now, this brings me to some of the pathways to address some of the challenges and actually make the digital ID system more and more inclusive. So, the two pathways that we have kind of come upon is the stakeholder specific recommendations. So, the stakeholder specific recommendations are catered towards ID developers and deployers, community based entities, and users. So, these are some of the recommendations that you will find in great detail and in our report, and I'll be taking you through some of the specific recommendations towards that we have made in the report briefly. And the second pathway to address is a toolkit that we have made. So this is basically a self-evaluation toolkit that can be used by the ID authority and ID developer, basically which kind of maps the challenges, the implication, and the global practices, the best practices that can be used by the ID authority and the developers to think about the ways to address some of the challenges, and to actually make the deployment and maybe the design of the digital ID system more inclusive. Next slide, please. So these are some stakeholder specific recommendations that I will be taking you through. So first is the ID developer and deployer. So these are one of the key actors in the ID ecosystem in different countries that we have seen. So first is determining the scope and purpose of the ID system. It's very important for the digital ID system authorities, the ID developers and deployers to kind of define what the scope of the ID system is going to look like. A lot of the times, even though every country has a different approach in terms of how they position their ID system, but a lot of the times the use cases for the digital ID system are thought after they are implemented. They are kind of maybe an add-on after the system is implemented. A lot of the times, things like interoperability is not thought of, and how they can basically use the digital ID system as a layer to connect it with the already existing system. So these are some of the things that needs to be thought about in terms of how we are communicating about the ID, what are the incentives for the same, and how are we defining the scope and purpose of the ID system in the very beginning. Now, coming to incorporation of the key actors, what we have also seen is that, and a lot of the times when we talk about the IT system, it's mostly the IT authorities. A lot of the focus is also on the developer and deployers, but there are also other members in the ecosystem. For example, I talked about the users, I talked about the intermediaries. Now, it is a common knowledge that there are a lot of informal intermediaries that form parts of the IT ecosystem and then play a great role in terms of ensuring awareness, access, and usage, but there needs to be a way in which they can be incorporated in the IT system and to be made part of the larger ecosystem. For example, need to be like formally recognized. They need to be thought about in terms of what are the incentives, what are some of the mechanisms for them to be able to participate in ID related conversation. Now, coming to the another set of recommendation is adopting an ecosystem approach. So now when we talk about the ecosystem, a lot of the times only technical sides of the thing is thought about. A lot of the times non-technical layers are not thought about and only thought about when we are thinking about maybe like the percentage of adoption or maybe like the uptake of the ID. So things like the registration centers, the role of the operators, what the capacity of the registration center is like, how is the registration center performing, what does the capacity of the operator look like, are they trained to be gender sensitive in terms of like providing their services. All of these play a great role. For example, the perception of the people while they go and actually use these centers, and what does the devices look like, what is the role of the intermediary in the whole ecosystem. So there needs to be more and more involvement of the non-technical layer players also when we think about the ID ecosystem. Then prioritizing user protection and usage. There are a lot of concerns regarding like how the user data is being managed. Is it safe enough? Is it robust enough? Particularly when we think about gender inclusive digital ID, as women are more vulnerable to harm in the digital ecosystem. There needs to be also thought about principles, for example, around encryption and what the data protection principles look like when when we are thinking about including like the user first principle in building out the digital ID system. Then gender intentional design and deployment. A lot of the times after the ID system is built, then only we think about how do we make it gender inclusive. But there needs to be lot more discussion and around the role of the people who are actually, for example, gender specialists, UI and UX researcher who have actually been working on this systems like gender mag, and how do we actually make the digital ID system more robust as and when we are thinking about the digital ID system. So, for example, the representation of women in the ID authority. How do we think about more women in the registration centers? How can we make the registration center more gender sensitive? So, these are some of the recommendations that we have given as part of the gender intentional design and deployment. Now, the next set of recommendation around feedback loop and communication channel. So, a lot of the times, even when there are actors which are present on the ground, there are informal intermediaries who are kind of interacting with the users on a regular basis. A lot of the times there is no feedback loop happening within the ID authority, and even when there are communication channels there is no proper mode of communication. There are no diverse mode of communication, I would say, keeping in mind the diversity and the multi-model that might be needed to need to think about the cultural context, need to think about the diversity of the languages, need to think about what are some of the grievance channel and how they can be made more robust. What are some of the ways in which we can reach out to the more people? For example, thinking about any kind of communication challenge that might work in urban centers. For example, maybe like notifications or maybe kind of push off messages through the apps. They might not work in the rural setting. So, what are some of the ways in which you can think about strengthening the communication channel? Then leveraging the existing infrastructure, knowledge, and capacity. There are already existing capacities of the infrastructure and the people, which is already there on the ground. So when thinking about deploying digital ID systems, there needs to be think about things like co-location strategies. How can we use the existing resources? For example, we have seen in countries like Philippines, we have seen even in India, where we have relied on post offices, we have relied on schools, we have relied on banks, where we have actually made use of existing physical infrastructure to cut down on our cost and kind of use their knowledge and capacity to act as a link between the ID authority and also between the people. Now, presence of alternate and complementary pathways. So, what we have also seen is that a lot of the times the systems that are built keeping in mind a particular section of the people might not work when we are looking at diverse locations, for example, remote location and maybe in the rural setting. So, we need to think a lot more about those locations as well and what could be some of the alternate pathways. For example, things like nomination. If anybody does not have a document, then what are some of the pathways in which we can think of alternate ways of recognizing that person? For example, nominating through like community nomination, what are some of the ways in which we can think about authentication more inclusively. So if there is a place where the network is bad, or maybe online authentication is a recurring problem, what are some of the inclusive ways in which we can think about offline authentication as well, or to make the authentication system more robust. So these are some of the recommendations that are catered towards the ID developers and deployers. Next slide, please. So the next, so this slide, I'll be talking about what are some of the recommendations that we have given for the community-based entities and the users. For example, what community-based identities that they can do is reduce the discovery cost. So how they can help basically is that because they are embedded within the network of the community, or they have hyperlocal connections, so they basically reduce the discovery cost of the people. So it makes it easy for them to kind of access people, for them to be able to reach out to people at low cost. So basically they can help the ID authority in bridging the gap by keeping in mind and providing low cost connectivity between the ID authorities and the people. Second is facilitating the participation. So a lot of the time it's very difficult to mobilize people who are remotely located and for the ID authorities, because there is a lack of trust. So community-based entities, because they are based out of those communities, they have high level of trust within the communities, they understand the local context and nuances, they are able to mobilize people better. So basically they can help in facilitating the participation and mobilization of the people, and ensuring that what is the actual gender gap, what does the participation for women in that particular community look like. Then strengthening ecosystem engagement. So there are a lot of opportunities also which are now opening up, which kind of looks at the role of the community-based entities. For example, forums which invite the consultation of the people from the communities, which have nuances and they have evidence because they are based out of the ground, for them to be able to participate in consultation in kind of any kind of policy framing which is being done at the global level or at the ID authority level, for them to be participating in this global convenings, for them to participate in the policy consultation and act as a feedback loop between the community and the ID authority, to take some of the concerns and needs of the community to the ID developers in the authority. Then informing policy making. The community-based entities, they can also play a great role in informing the policy making of the particular country, because they are not only engaging in awareness as access, but a lot of the time are deeply involved in doing research within the community, doing participatory research. So they are aware of the particular problems. For example, what are the access level, like what are the awareness level challenges, and what are some of the usage level challenges. So they can give very pinpointed insights into what can be actually done to reform and shape up the policy even more. Now, coming to the users, users also are one of the key stakeholders. And what are some of the recommendations that we have made in our report is the users, they can be leveraged, they can provide their feedback when they test the system. So when we are talking about both technical and non-technical layer, for example, when we are talking about framework like GenderMag, where they are trying to understand what the UI UX problem in the technological architecture is like, or when we are talking about the awareness and access, the functioning of the registration system, what the grievance redressal system is like. So these are some of the feedback that can be provided by the users. Then informing policy conversation and narratives. A lot of the times there is lack of participation, which leads to silos in what the policy making is like, and what the concerns of the users are like. So having user facing dialogues between the ID authority and participating in them, for example, user assessment surveys, experience surveys after they have obtained any kind of services, participating in all of them can shape up the narrative around their experiences around the ID. Then lastly, gender supportive ecosystem. So as we have been talking about the gender inclusion, the digital ID system as a users and also as a community, how they can facilitate gender inclusion is thinking about the people in their home, the women in their household or in their surrounding, and how can they actually support them in being digital literate, how they can actually support in their awareness and access, and how they can kind of reshape and play a role in behavioral challenges around the usage, awareness, and access of the digital IT system. So these are some of the recommendations that we have made. for the users. Now I hand it back to Kunal to kind of demo the toolkit and tell about what does it contain, how is it useful, and how that can be leveraged by the ID authorities and developers.
Thanks, Moshimi. I know that we're at time, so I'll try and keep this short. But essentially, like Moshimi mentioned, I think there was basically what our research kind of showed us is that there is, of course, a lot of different ways in which this problem can be addressed. But I think primarily what we wanted to do with the ecosystem and how we wanted to proceed is by using these 4 specific assets that we have been able to create. So the awareness access usage framework has actually been used by a lot of different community-based entities, has been leveraged by a lot of different types of organizations to continue to build out some of their further research and so on. I think, as Moshimi mentioned, we've also built a community of practice, which means that we have gotten a lot of community-based entities out of Ethiopia, Philippines, as well as, sorry, Moshimi, can you just go on mute? There's an echo. So what we've also been able to do is create a community of practice that relies on the expertise, knowledge, experiences of community-based entities based out of Ethiopia, Philippines, Sri Lanka, India. And what we've been able to kind of do within 5 sessions is contextualize a lot of these challenges that we have highlighted, and what are the ways in which different ecosystem actors are addressing them already, and what are the ways in which they can continue to be addressed. And we also hope that all of this information, which is in the public domain, is accessible to everyone. So we have a website that we have created specifically for this research, as well as the ongoing investigations that we'll sort of continue. And as I think, as Moshimi mentioned, we've also built out a very comprehensive toolkit. So the stakeholder-specific recommendations work towards providing solutions, towards providing pathways for the specific stakeholders. And the contextualized toolkit, which is again a very open one, dives into almost about 50 to 70 different types of barriers that we had identified, and what are the ways in which they have implications, how do they play out, what are the ways in which these implications can be seen, how can they be addressed, and what are the practices that we have observed globally. So I think the entire toolkit, which I'll just show everyone, is about 256 pathways, and our goal over the next sort of few months and this year is to think about hyper-contextualization and how do we think about making these applicable for very specific countries. And that is kind of the effort now, is to build out a community of practice that works on this. So just in terms of how we're thinking about it, is we're building out this community of practice 2.0, which tries to address these problems at a hyperlocal level. It tries to become a lot more specific and intentional about its identification, about its addressal. And we will obviously try and get a lot of different types of expertise, which would consist of different ecosystem experts as well as community-based entities too. And I think ultimately what we want to do is, I think similar to what MOSIP's goal is in creating a community-based intervention and community-based effort throughout all of this, is continue to bolster the ecosystem to think in this way and to find ways to intervene in meaningful, with meaningful manner, with a meaningful way, and also ultimately think about how they can actually contribute to some of these questions and create some solutions, hopefully. I'll just quickly, I think, show a little bit of what our toolkit looks like, if I have the opportunity to. I know that we're a few minutes over time, but essentially, and I think, Moshimi, if you can just share some of these links on the chat. What we've been able to do is create this microsite, which we're calling the Inclusion Hub, which consolidates a lot of the research that we referenced that we thought was very helpful for the community that we're part of. We have also put down a lot of different insights and learnings that we've had from these community of practice sessions. And what we were able to, I think, devise is the gender toolkit, which we're hoping is helpful for a variety of different ecosystem actors that want to access it. How can we actually go down and use this in country-specific contexts? So just a quick walkthrough. I think, as Moshimi mentioned, we've applied the awareness access usage framework. We've built out the context, the pillars, the categories, the subcategories, and the self-assessment component of it, and what are the implications and the practices around it. So it's a lovely way to just kind of follow the path, and I'll just quickly take us through one. So if you access this tool, you can click on access. Sorry for the double word, but you can click on access, and what you'll be able to see is the different areas in which access-related challenges emerge. So infrastructure, resource ownership, logistical, creation and facilitation of backward and forward linkages, capacity building, and for the community as well. So if we click on infrastructure, which talks about the ways in which infrastructure may be not as conducive, we'll see that there are a few questions around availability, capacity, capability, and alternate access mechanism. So I think just drawing on the point that we made on the earlier slides, if we had to create a different or an alternative pathway for accessing digital identities, what are the ways in which it could be done? And what you come across is co-location strategies. So if I wanted to explore what are the different ways co-location strategies can be thought about, I would click here. And it would ask me a question, and this is the self-evaluation part of it. Can users register for their IDs through other facilities? Now, if your answer is yes, please share with us what that practice is, because we would love to include it. And it would become part of this toolkit. But if your answer is no, what it shows you is the implication of it. So what is the way in which this might become a bit tougher or a bit of a roadblock for women specifically? And if we then want to address this challenge, these are the different types of practices that we've observed. And I think, as per Maushami's earlier point, we've seen co-location strategies existing in schools, in bank branches, and we've seen it in various different countries. So we've hoped to use this sort of this pathway to actually identify how co-location strategies can be thought about and what kind of problem they address. So that's on the toolkit, and I would have loved to walk you through a few more pathways, but essentially it's a fairly comprehensive tool. And like I mentioned, I think the goal over time is to make this hyper-contextual, hyper-specific, ensure that ID authorities and developers that are using this tool actually have a robust set of practices that they can use in order to strengthen the entire system build. I think that's the goal that we're trying to achieve here, is that if ID systems were to be made more gender intentional, can we create a much more holistic approach for all of this? As part of the community of practice, we are reinstating, and I think to Arun's point earlier around not trying to create too much webinar fatigue, but we are reinstating a lot of the community of practice efforts that we have been able to undertake over the last year. And our goal is very straightforward. We want to now use expertise and experience to build out specific context pathways for countries that are deploying digital ID systems. And over this year, that's what we're hoping to do. And we're hoping that we can leverage the expertise and experience of the people within the community of practice to help us do this. Just I think as the final note from our side at Aapti is that we've been working on this problem, and I don't think this is something that we will be able to kind of solve in isolation. It does require a community effort. It requires a continuous effort and an intentional one. We're hoping that the various assets that we've created help us kind of bring about a lot of awareness around some of the problems that we've been able to identify. And I think over the next sort of year or so, we're hoping to now bring this not just, I think, not just the challenges that we've been able to identify, but what are some ways in which these challenges can be addressed. We want to bring that forth and make sure that they are applicable and ultimately work towards some form of inclusivity across very critical sort of systems like digital ID systems. So that's, I think, in sort of the summation of it all. It's been a lovely 2-year process for us, studying various different countries, building out frameworks, building out tools. We've also been able to think about this from a community-based initiative. We've been able to build out a community of practice, a toolkit, and a report that I think, if Maushami, if you've been able to share that, it's on the link. So please, everyone, feel free to go through that. And please reach out to us. I don't know if we have time for questions today, but We would love to hear from you. We would love to get to know you and understand how you're addressing some of these problems that we've been able to identify. And thank you to the MOSIP team for sort of letting us share this, not just today, but previously as well, and for collaborating with us on this research. Rohit, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kunal. Unfortunately, we have run over time, so we won't be able to take a Q&A session as we had planned. But I hope most of your questions have been answered through the Q&A chat where our team was answering these questions live. And if you have any further questions, feedback, any collaboration ideas, please write to us at info@mosip.io. And with that note, I would like to thank you all for joining us today evening. For some people, it will be morning and afternoon, but it's late evening in India. So thank you all for persisting more than 90 minutes with us. It was great having all of you. And a special thanks to Professor Sharma, Kunal, and Maushmi for helping us plan this first MOSIP Forum. We look forward to engaging with the community more closely and bringing more learning and more sort of informative sessions through the MOSIP Forum platform that we have launched today. So thank you all and good night. Bye-bye.